good evening, or perhaps good morning, depending on when these words find you. Settle in. Tonight, we drift through the curious annals of human ingenuity, exploring not the triumphs but the spectacular, often bizarre, and occasionally terrifying failures that paved the way for modern marvels. We're venturing into the dusty blueprints of forgotten dreams, the workshops of well-intentioned eccentrics, and the often grim realities of inventions that simply refuse to work as intended. Many of these stories begin with grand visions, a desire to conquer nature, to simplify life, or to achieve the impossible. But as we'll soon discover, the path from idea to functional reality is fraught with more pitfalls than propellers, more crashes than carriages. Tonight, we begin our journey high above the earth, exploring the early, ambitious, and often ill-fated attempts to master the skies, long before the Wright brothers ever dreamt of Kitty Hawk. Our first foray into the bizarre history of failed inventions takes us to the dawn of the aerial age. Not the age of fixed-wing aircraft, mind you, but the era of lighter-than-air craft, the majestic, yet often tragically flawed dirigibles. The very word dirigible evokes a certain grandeur, a vision of elegant airships gliding silently above the clouds, a genteel precursor to modern air travel. Yet their story is one punctuated by catastrophic explosions, sudden fiery descents, and the haunting specter of hydrogen. Before the airplane, before the hot air balloon was truly practical for long distances, inventors dreamt of directable balloons. Balloons could float, certainly, but they were slaves to the wind. The challenge then was to make them dirigible, that is, steerable. The early 19th century saw a flurry of designs, many of them as whimsical as they were unworkable. Imagine paddle-wheel airships, propeller-driven balloons powered by hand cranks, or even designs that sought to mimic the flapping wings of birds, all scaled up to improbable sizes. These weren't just idle sketches. Brave, often foolhardy, men and women climbed into these contraptions, hoping to defy gravity and conquer the boundless sky. One of the earliest pioneers was Henry Giffard. In 1852, this French engineer constructed a 144-foot-long dirigible powered by a 3-horsepower steam engine. It was a marvel of its time, achieving a speed of about 6 miles per hour. A remarkable feat, to be sure, proving the concept of directional air travel. However, the sheer weight of the steam engine and its fuel severely limited its payload and range. And crucially, the steam engine presented a terrifying risk, sparks flying near a hydrogen-filled envelope. The danger of a mid-air explosion was ever present, a silent, ticking clock for those who dared to ascend. Giffard's dirigible was a success in concept, but a failure in practical safety and scalability. It was a beautiful but terrifying stepping stone. The late 19th and early 20th centuries truly marked the golden age of dirigibles. German Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, an ex-military officer, became synonymous with these giants of the sky. His rigid airships, with their internal metal frameworks, were far more robust and capable than Giffard's flexible models. The Zeppelins, as they became known, were grand, luxurious, and initially quite successful. They promised a new era of transatlantic travel, a serene journey above the oceans, offering unparalleled comfort and views. For a brief, shining moment, they represented the pinnacle of aerial engineering, but the inherent flaws began to surface. While magnificent, Zeppelins were extraordinarily susceptible to weather. Strong winds could rip their fragile skin, heavy rain could weigh them down, and sudden storms could turn them into airborne death traps. The sheer volume of highly flammable hydrogen required to lift these behemoths was a constant source of anxiety. Every spark, every electrical fault, every potential leak was a flirtation with disaster. The most infamous example, of course, is the Hindenburg disaster of 1937. This wasn't just a technical failure. It was a psychological blow that irrevocably sealed the fate of large-scale passenger dirigible travel. The Hindenburg was a symbol of German engineering prowess, a testament to luxury and ambition. Its fiery destruction, caught on newsreel cameras for the world to see, was a terrifying spectacle. The hydrogen ignited, turning the majestic airship into a colossal inferno in mere seconds, raining burning debris onto the ground. 36 people lost their lives, but the true casualty was public trust. The image of the Hindenburg burning remains etched in collective memory, a stark reminder of the inherent dangers of hydrogen and the fragility of even the grandest designs. What caused the Hindenburg to ignite? Theories abound, ranging from sabotage to static electricity. The most widely accepted explanation today points to a static discharge igniting a leak of hydrogen near the stern. Regardless of the precise trigger, the fundamental flaw was the reliance on hydrogen as the lifting gas. Its flammability was a known risk, but at the time, non-flammable helium was either too scarce or too expensive for large-scale use, especially for a nation like Germany facing post-World War I restrictions. Beyond the Hindenburg, countless other airship accidents, though less famous, contributed to the overall sense of unease. The USS Akron and USS Macon, two American rigid airships, both crashed in the 1930s due to structural failures in turbulent weather, resulting in significant loss of life. These were not just isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern demonstrating the limitations of the technology and the unforgiving nature of the elements when faced with such enormous, delicate structures. The dream of the dirigible, once soaring so high, ultimately crashed and burned, quite literally. It was a grand vision, a romantic ideal, but one built on a foundation that was simply too volatile. The sheer scale, the vulnerability to weather, and the catastrophic consequences of hydrogen ignition proved to be insurmountable obstacles. While smaller, non-rigid airships filled with helium still exist today for advertising or surveillance, the era of the majestic passenger dirigible as a viable mode of transport ended abruptly and tragically. It serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes, even the most innovative ideas with the greatest potential can be undone by fundamental flaws that technology, at the time, simply cannot overcome. And with that, we conclude our first descent into the strange and cautionary tales of history's wilder inventions. We'll soon move from the skies to the seas, where similar ambitious failures awaited. You've chosen wisely. Now let's descend from the perilous skies to the equally treacherous waters, where humanity's ambition to conquer the waves led to some truly remarkable and often tragic failures. Prepare to hear tales of vessels that were too slow, too unstable, or simply too impractical to ever truly sail into the annals of successful innovation. Having witnessed the fiery demise of the magnificent airships, we now turn our gaze to the depths, to the silent, crushing pressures of the ocean, where another radical dream took shape, the submarine. For centuries, the idea of traveling beneath the waves, unseen and undetected, held a powerful allure for inventors, spies, and military strategists alike. Imagine the tactical advantage of striking from below, or the scientific marvel of exploring the ocean floor. But the journey from concept to safe, functional reality was riddled with challenges as vast and unforgiving as the ocean itself. Early submarines were less sophisticated vessels of war and exploration, and more often claustrophobic death traps. The earliest documented attempts at submersible craft date back centuries. Legends speak of Alexander the Great descending in a glass barrel, but more concrete, though still fantastical, accounts emerge in the late Renaissance. In the early 17th century, Cornelis Drebbel, a Dutch inventor in the employ of the English crown, is credited with building one of the first truly functional submarines. His craft, reportedly propelled by oars, was said to have submerged in the River Thames, carrying King James I for a short ride. While impressive for its time, Drebel's submarine was a rudimentary wooden vessel, likely little more than an oversized or powered rowboat with a watertight cover. Its capabilities were severely limited: short dives, shallow depths, and a primitive air supply that likely left its occupants gasping for breath. It was a proof of concept, a whisper of what might be possible, rather than a practical invention. The true push for military submarines came during the American Revolutionary War. David Bushnell, an American inventor, created the Turtle in 1776, arguably the first submarine used in combat. Shaped like two turtle shells joined together, this one-man, hand-powered submersible was designed to attach an explosive charge to the hull of a British warship. The concept was ingenious. Approach silently, drill into the enemy's wooden hull with an auger, attach a mine, and retreat. In September 1776, its pilot, Ezra Lee, attempted to attack HMS Eagle in New York Harbor. He successfully approached the ship undetected, but a combination of the ship's copper sheathing and Lee's exhaustion prevented him from drilling into the hull. The mine was released but drifted away and exploded harmlessly. The Turtle's failure wasn't a flaw in its fundamental design, so much as the insurmountable practical difficulties of single-person operation, manual labor, and the crude tools of the era. It was a vision ahead of its time, limited by the technology available. As the 19th century progressed, the dream of the submarine persisted. The American Civil War saw further desperate attempts to break naval blockades. The Confederacy, particularly, invested in submersible technology. This led to the creation of the infamous H.L. Hunley. This hand-cranked, iron submarine was a technological leap forward, but a deadly one. It sank not once, but twice during training missions, claiming the lives of 13 crew members, including its designer, Horace Lawson Hunley, on the second occasion. Despite these tragedies, the Confederates persevered. On February 17, 1864, the Hunley successfully attacked and sank the Union sloop of war USS Housatonic, becoming the first submarine in history to sink an enemy warship. A monumental achievement, to be sure. Yet, the Hunley itself vanished after the attack, taking its entire 8-man crew with it. Its ultimate fate remained a mystery for over a century until its wreck was discovered in 1995. The Hunley's success came at an unimaginable cost, highlighting the extreme perils of early underwater travel. It was a functional weapon, but one that consumed its operators with terrifying regularity. The problem with these early submarines wasn't just the lack of reliable propulsion or effective weapons. It was the fundamental challenge of life support in a sealed metal tube submerged deep underwater. The air inside quickly became stale, filled with carbon dioxide from the crew's breath, and often contaminated by the fumes of primitive engines. Early solutions included bags of lime to absorb CO2 or simply surfacing to vent and refresh the air, but these were crude and often insufficient. A long dive meant gradual suffocation. Furthermore, the materials and construction techniques of the time were often inadequate for the immense pressure of the deep. Hulls could buckle, seams could leak, and the risk of catastrophic implosion was a constant, terrifying possibility. Even a small leak could quickly turn a confined space into a watery tomb. The fear of being trapped, slowly drowning, or being crushed was a very real psychological burden for early submariners. The quest for a reliable power source also led to bizarre and dangerous experiments. Early electric batteries were heavy, inefficient, and prone to leaking corrosive acids. Some designs even experimented with steam power, which seems utterly counterintuitive for a submerged vessel. Imagine trying to manage a coal-fired boiler underwater, with all its inherent heat, smoke, and the need for fresh air to sustain the fire. The British K-class submarines of World War I were a prime example of this ill-fated design. They were steam-powered, requiring a complex system of retractable funnels and vents that had to be sealed before diving. If these mechanisms failed, or if the seals weren't perfect, a dive could quickly become a disaster, flooding the boiler room and condemning the crew. Several K-class submarines were lost in accidents, often due to their complex and unreliable steam systems. They were notoriously dangerous, earning the nickname K-boats of death. Beyond direct sinking, diving accidents also plagued early underwater exploration. Even without a full submarine, the idea of working or observing underwater led to the development of diving bells. These were essentially inverted containers, open at the bottom, which trapped air as they were lowered, allowing divers to work for short periods. While revolutionary, they too had their limitations and dangers. Maintaining adequate air pressure, preventing leaks and the risks of decompression sickness, the bends, were constant concerns. A sudden loss of pressure or a failure in the hoisting mechanism could strand or kill the occupants. The very early bells offered little more than a temporary, hazardous refuge beneath the waves. The development of the modern, reliable submarine was a long, painful process, built upon a foundation of countless failures and the sacrifices of brave, anonymous pioneers. It was a dream pursued relentlessly, often with more courage than common sense, resulting in inventions that, while visionary, were fundamentally flawed for their time. The ocean, with its immense pressure, its crushing cold, and its unforgiving nature, proved to be an even more formidable foe than the vast expanse of the sky. As we conclude this segment on the watery graves of innovation, we'll resurface to consider other forms of transportation that, despite good intentions, were destined to flounder. Absolutely. From the vast, unyielding sky and the crushing embrace of the deep, we now bring our focus to the familiar, yet surprisingly perilous realm of land transportation. For every smooth ride and efficient journey we take today, there are countless bizarre, impractical, and downright dangerous contraptions that were once hailed as the future. Tonight, we'll explore the roads less traveled, the paths poorly paved, and the vehicles that proved more trouble than they were worth. The humble wheel, one of humanity's oldest and most profound inventions, has carried us for millennia. Yet when combined with ambition, limited understanding of physics, or just plain bad ideas, even the simplest modes of land travel can become sources of frustration, injury, and comical failure. From early attempts at personal mobility to grand visions of interconnected railways, the ground beneath our feet has been the stage for some truly astonishing missteps in design. Let's begin with the very personal and often precarious journey of the bicycle. Before the comfortable geared bicycles we know today, there was a strange menagerie of two-wheeled contraptions. The earliest velocipedes of the 19th century, like the Draisen or running machine, lacked pedals entirely. Riders propelled themselves by pushing off the ground with their feet, a strenuous and undignified endeavor. While a step towards independent mobility, imagine the sheer exhaustion of traveling any significant distance. These early bikes were less about efficiency and more about demonstrating a principle, leaving their users with sore legs and worn-out shoes. Then came the bone shaker. Introduced in the 1860s, these bikes added pedals directly to the front wheel. But with wooden wheels, iron tires, and no suspension, every pebble, every crack in the road sent a jarring jolt directly through the rider's body. The name was no exaggeration. Riding one was an exercise in masochism, leading to numb limbs and a thorough rattling of the skeleton. While a significant mechanical step, the bone shaker was a testament to the fact that innovation without comfort is a hard sell. It was a brutal, though necessary, evolutionary step. The penny farthing, with its impossibly large front wheel and tiny rear one, was the next evolutionary leap, offering a smoother ride and higher speeds due to its direct drive. But what it gained in speed, it lost in safety and practicality. Mounting and dismounting required acrobatic skill, and a sudden stop or collision could send the rider flying headfirst over the handlebars, a phenomenon grimly known as taking a header. Imagine sailing through the air from a height of 5 or 6 feet, landing awkwardly on cobblestones. The penny farthing, while iconic, was a monument to inherent instability, a stylish but perilous ride for the daring. Its very design dictated a high center of gravity, making it prone to spectacular and dangerous tumbles. Beyond these well-known, albeit problematic, early bicycles, there were more esoteric failures. Consider the Itra plastic bicycle from 1982. Conceived by a Swedish company, this bike was entirely made of plastic, intended to be lightweight and maintenance-free. In theory, a noble goal. In practice, the plastic frame lacked the necessary rigidity, making it feel floppy and inefficient to pedal. The handlebars were prone to snapping, and assembling the bike was a frustrating ordeal, often with missing parts. It was a classic example of a good idea, lightweight, durable materials, executed with the wrong application, proving that not all plastic is created equal when it comes to structural integrity and rider safety. It was a vision of the future that, quite literally, bent under pressure. Moving from personal transport to the grander scale, the early days of railways were also marked by significant challenges and unexpected dangers. While today we take the smooth, consistent ride of a train for granted, the invention of the locomotive and the laying of tracks was a monumental, often experimental, undertaking. Early track designs themselves were problematic. Cast iron rails were brittle and prone to breaking under heavy loads, leading to frequent derailments. The transition to wrought iron and later steel was a crucial, expensive, and sometimes dangerous learning curve. And then there were the locomotives themselves. Early steam engines were temperamental beasts, prone to boiler explosions, broken components, and a host of other mechanical failures. Imagine a journey on an early 19th century train. The carriages were often open to the elements, leaving passengers exposed to the weather and, more critically, to the clouds of smoke, ash, and cinders spewing from the locomotive. Passengers would arrive at their destination grimy, eyes irritated, and clothes soiled. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a health hazard, particularly for long journeys. The very concept of train travel was terrifying to some. The speeds, though slow by modern standards, were unprecedented. There were fears that the human body couldn't withstand speeds above 30 miles per hour, that passengers would suffocate or their blood would boil. While these fears were unfounded, the sheer novelty and raw power of the locomotive were genuinely intimidating. Early safety systems were rudimentary at best. Braking was often inefficient, and signaling systems were primitive, leading to devastating head-on collisions. The sheer force of a steam locomotive, coupled with heavy, unyielding carriages, meant that accidents, when they occurred, were catastrophic. Derailments due to poor track maintenance or mechanical failure were common, turning a smooth ride into a violent, metal-screeching nightmare. And we can't forget the bridge-to-nowhere phenomena. Not a vehicle failure, but an infrastructure flop that stranded countless commuters in the literal sense. There are numerous examples throughout history of bridges or sections of railway lines built with grand ambition, only to be abandoned due to changes in plans, funding issues, or unforeseen geographical challenges. Imagine a train line ending abruptly in the middle of nowhere, or a magnificent bridge spanning a chasm, but connecting to nothing on the other side. These aren't just architectural oddities. They represent massive financial losses, wasted resources, and the dashed hopes of communities. The infamous Tacoma Narrows Bridge, Galloping Gertie. which collapsed in 1940 due to aeroelastic flutter, is a stark reminder that even seemingly sound engineering can buckle under the invisible forces of nature. Its rhythmic, almost hypnotic oscillation before its spectacular collapse is a chilling testament to the unpredictable nature of structural dynamics. From bone-shaking bicycles to derailment-prone trains and bridges leading to nowhere, the history of land transportation is littered with inventions that, for various reasons, simply didn't work. These failures, however, were not in vain. Each uncomfortable ride, each broken rail, each collapsed bridge offered invaluable lessons, pushing engineers and inventors to refine their designs, improve their materials, and ultimately make the journeys we take today safer and more efficient. As we conclude this segment, we'll turn our attention to the more immediate failures within the confines of our personal vehicles, where bizarre features and impractical designs often met a swift, ignominious end. Absolutely. The internal combustion engine, once a miracle of engineering, has given rise to countless attempts at innovation that were, in hindsight, utterly misguided. Let's delve into the quirky, the unnecessary, and the downright dangerous features that automobile manufacturers once thought would revolutionize our driving experience. The automobile, that symbol of freedom and convenience, has been subject to endless experimentation since its inception. Engineers and designers, driven by ambition, market trends, or simply a lack of foresight, have graced us with an astonishing array of features that were either ahead of their time, ill-conceived, or just plain weird. Tonight, we open the car doors to some of the strangest failures in automotive history, the features that made you wonder, what were they thinking? Let's begin with the truly audacious and utterly impractical. Imagine driving your car and needing to cook a meal. Some inventors, in a burst of culinary optimism, introduced the concept of the in-car microwave oven. Yes, you heard that right. The idea was simple: long road trips, quick hot meals. The reality, however, was far less appealing. These bulky appliances, often powered by the car's 12V outlet, were slow, inefficient, and posed significant safety risks. The notion of heating up a frozen dinner while hurtling down the highway at 60 miles per hour, potentially distracting the driver, or having hot food slosh around during a sudden stop, made this a concept that quickly sputtered out. Most people sensibly preferred a roadside diner or a packed sandwich. It was an invention that completely misunderstood the purpose of a car. Equally baffling were attempts to integrate other home comforts into vehicles. Consider the in-car record player, specifically Chrysler's Highway Hi-Fi system from the mid-1950s. This was before cassette tapes or CDs, and music on the go meant a bulky, vibration-prone record player mounted in the dashboard. While it played special, smaller records designed to reduce skipping, any significant bump in the road could send the needle flying, scratching your precious vinyl and ruining the listening experience. The logistical nightmare of changing records while driving, combined with the fragile nature of the medium in a moving vehicle, ensured its rapid demise. It was a novel idea, but one utterly incompatible with the dynamic environment of a car. Some failures weren't about luxury, but about fundamental design. Take the notorious Ford Pinto. Its infamy stems not from a bizarre feature, but from a catastrophic design flaw related to its fuel tank. Due to its placement behind the rear axle, a relatively low-speed rear-end collision could cause the fuel tank to rupture and ignite, often leading to tragic fatalities. This wasn't a crazy invention in the typical sense, but rather a crazy omission in safety design, leading to immense controversy and recalls. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the most dangerous failures are hidden beneath the surface, not flashy features. Then there are the aesthetics that went terribly wrong. The Pontiac Aztek, launched in 2001, is often cited as one of the ugliest cars ever produced. Its designers attempted to combine an SUV, a minivan, and a sports car, resulting in a clunky, ungainly, and plastic-clad vehicle that alienated nearly everyone. Despite some innovative features like a built-in tent attachment for camping, its polarizing design was its undeniable downfall. No amount of utility could overcome its visual assault. It stands as a monument to how crucial design appeal is in consumer products, especially in the competitive automotive market. Speaking of design, let's not forget the bizarre steering wheels. The standard round steering wheel has been refined over decades for intuitive control. Yet, some designers flirted with square or joystick steering mechanisms. The square steering wheel, particularly in some early 1960s concept cars, was an ergonomic nightmare, awkward to turn and offering poor feedback. Joysticks, while promising a futuristic aviation-inspired feel, proved incredibly difficult to master for precise vehicle control, posing serious safety risks. The human hand and brain are accustomed to the tactile feedback of a circular wheel, and these radical departures simply couldn't compete with centuries of ingrained motor skills. Safety features, too, have had their missteps. Remember the automatic shoulder belts of the 1980s and early 90s. These belts, designed to automatically extend and retract along a track when the door opened or closed, were a response to passive restraint mandates. While seemingly convenient, they were often annoying, trapping occupants, getting tangled, or failing entirely. Crucially, many drivers felt a false sense of security and neglected to fasten the manual lap belt, leaving them dangerously unprotected in a collision. The advent of airbags quickly rendered these complicated and often irritating systems obsolete, demonstrating that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. And what about the car that talked back? The talking car was a brief fad in the early 1980s, where vehicles would verbally alert drivers to issues like a door is ajar or your fuel level is low. While initially novel, the robotic voices quickly became irritating and distracting. Imagine being constantly nagged by your car. Most drivers found the constant chatter more annoying than helpful, preferring the quiet efficiency of warning lights and gauges. It was a case of technology being implemented for its own sake, rather than genuinely improving the driving experience. Finally, we consider the most ambitious and perhaps most terrifying failed automotive innovation, the nuclear-powered car. In the atomic age of the 1950s, amidst the fascination with all things nuclear, Ford unveiled its Nucleon concept in 1958. This theoretical car was powered by a miniature nuclear reactor in the rear, promising incredibly long ranges without refueling. The concept car models depicted a sleek, futuristic vehicle. Thankfully, the inherent dangers of miniaturized nuclear reactors in a mobile, accident-prone consumer product quickly became apparent. The risks of radiation exposure, catastrophic meltdowns in a crash, and the sheer logistical nightmare of refueling nuclear material made this a dream that was, quite literally, too hot to handle. It remains a fascinating, albeit chilling, what if in automotive history? From in-car microwaves to talking dashboards and atomic engines, the journey of the automobile is paved with inventions that, despite their ambition, were destined for the scrap heap of history. These flops, however, underscore the continuous process of trial and error inherent in innovation, a constant striving for perfection that sometimes produces fascinating, if ultimately useless, detours. We've explored the roads, the rails, the skies, and the seas. Next, we shall turn our attention to the more immediate failures within the confines of our personal vehicles, where bizarre features and impractical designs often met a swift, ignominious end. You're absolutely correct. The home, that sanctuary of comfort and efficiency, has seen its fair share of truly bizarre and utterly useless inventions. Let's step inside, shall we, and marvel at the domestic disasters and peculiar gadgets that once promised to revolutionize our lives, only to gather dust in the forgotten corners of history. After traversing the dangerous skies, the crushing depths, and the erratic roads, we now enter the seemingly mundane, yet surprisingly fertile ground for invention, the home. For centuries, inventors have sought to ease domestic burdens, enhance comfort, or simply make life more modern. But for every washing machine or refrigerator, there are dozens of utterly baffling contraptions that prove the adage that necessity isn't always the mother of good invention. Prepare for tales of culinary catastrophes, hygiene horrors, and convenience gone completely awry. Let's begin in the kitchen, a place of nourishment and sometimes invention gone wrong. We've all seen single-purpose gadgets, the banana slicer, the avocado tool, that seem to solve a problem that never truly existed. But some inventions transcend mere redundancy and enter the realm of the absurd. Consider the Rolly Eggmaster. This vertical, tube-shaped device promised to cook eggs into a neat, cylindrical shape, perfect for eating on a stick. You crack an egg, pour it into the heated tube, and watch as a cooked, elongated egg rises from the top. While it certainly produced a unique form of egg, the taste was often rubbery, the cleanup was a hassle, and the practicality of an egg on a stick for everyday consumption was questionable at best. It was an answer to a question no one was asking. Equally perplexing was the Juicero, a Wi-Fi-enabled juicer that launched with a staggering $120 million in venture capital. This sleek high-tech appliance promised cold-pressed juice from proprietary pre-filled pouches. The catch: it was discovered that the juice pouches could be squeezed by hand with almost the same effort, rendering the expensive, internet-connected machine entirely redundant. The Juicero became a symbol of Silicon Valley's tendency to over-engineer simple solutions and create a product for which there was no real demand, beyond the allure of novelty and excessive investment. It was an app for a problem that didn't exist. Moving from the kitchen to the wider home, the quest for ultimate comfort and cleanliness also yielded peculiar results. In the early 20th century, as electricity became more widespread, so too did the ambition to automate every domestic task. Take, for instance, the automatic bed maker. This complex contraption, designed to mechanically pull up sheets and blankets, was bulky, expensive, and often unreliable. It promised to save minutes of daily labor, but introduced a whole host of mechanical issues, often getting tangled or failing to properly make the bed. It was a solution to a problem that most people solved with a few simple tugs and folds. The realm of personal hygiene has also given us some head-scratching inventions. Consider the various personal hygiene devices that emerged in the Victorian era, driven by a burgeoning interest in cleanliness but limited by scientific understanding. There were bizarre bathing machines, often clunky wooden contraptions, designed to make bathing easier, but which instead made it more cumbersome. Or the early, often painful, hair-growing contraptions that promised to reverse baldness through various forms of massage, suction, or even mild electrical shocks. These devices, often resembling medieval torture instruments more than beauty aids, were unsurprisingly ineffective and sometimes dangerous. The dimple maker, a contraption that promised to create permanent dimples by pressing metal rods into the cheeks, serves as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which people would go for fleeting beauty trends, often at the risk of permanent disfigurement. Then are the convenience items that simply missed the mark. The anti-bandit bag from the 1960s was an attempt to deter muggers. When threatened, the user would pull a chain, causing the bottom of the bag to open and spill its contents onto the ground, theoretically making it harder for the thief to grab everything. The flaw: It also made it impossible for the owner to retain their belongings. The very act of preventing theft also ensured total loss. It was a perfectly executed design for absolute failure. In the mid-20th century, the advent of television sparked a desire for hands-free relaxation. This led to inventions like the television glasses. These were essentially spectacles with tiny screens built into them, allowing the user to watch TV from any position, even lying down. However, the screens were low resolution, often caused severe eye strain, and tethered the viewer to a bulky power source. It was an early, uncomfortable precursor to virtual reality headsets, proving that while the idea of immersive viewing was appealing, the technology simply wasn't ready. And we can't forget the truly bizarre attempts at pest control. In 1963, a Japanese company invented the cat meow machine. This mechanical device, shaped like a cat, would meow 10 times a minute, with its eyes lighting up each time, supposedly to scare away rats and mice. While novel, its effectiveness was questionable at best. A constant, repetitive mechanical meow might annoy rodents initially, but it's unlikely to deter them long-term. More likely, it would just annoy the human occupants. It was a solution that lacked both subtlety and genuine deterrent power. Finally, let's consider inventions that were simply too loud, too large, or too impractical for the average home. Imagine the indoor clothes-drying carousel, a massive motorized device that promised to spin and dry your laundry indoors, but took up an entire room and consumed vast amounts of electricity. Or the various exercise machines from early last century that resembled industrial equipment more than fitness devices, requiring immense strength just to operate them. These were often so cumbersome and noisy that they quickly became glorified coat racks or were relegated to dusty attics. From the culinary oddities of the Eggmaster to the alarming impracticality of the anti-bandit bag and the mechanical meows of a fake cat, the domestic sphere has proven to be a rich ground for ambitious, yet ultimately flawed, inventions. Each curious contraption reminds us that while the desire for convenience and efficiency is universal, the path to achieving it is often winding, leading through a landscape of well-intentioned, but ultimately useless designs. With these household horrors behind us, we now move to a broader, more societal level, exploring grand engineering projects that, despite immense effort and investment, simply never came to fruition. Indeed, having navigated the comical and calamitous landscape of domestic gadgets, we now broaden our scope considerably. We're stepping onto the global stage, into the realm of grand visions, national pride, and engineering ambition on an epic scale. Here, the failures aren't just a quirky feature or a personal inconvenience. They are multi-billion-dollar follies, colossal structures that stand as monuments to hubris, changing political winds, or simply an inability to master the fundamental laws of economics and physics. Throughout history, empires, nations, and visionary leaders have embarked on truly monumental projects. Pyramids, Roman aqueducts, the Great Wall of China, these are testaments to human ambition and collective will. But for every successful wonder, there exist countless megaprojects that, despite enormous investment in time, money, and human effort, crumbled under their own weight, were abandoned mid-construction, or simply failed to deliver on their grand promises. These are the colossal blunders, the concrete ghosts of forgotten dreams. Our first stop on this tour of monumental flops takes us to the skies once more, but this time, it's not about the individual airship but the grandest vision of commercial flight, supersonic transport, SSD. For a brief, exhilarating period in the mid-20th century, it seemed inevitable that all commercial passenger planes would soon break the sound barrier, whisking travelers across oceans in mere hours. The Concorde, a joint Anglo-French venture, was the epitome of this dream, a beautiful, sleek machine that had transatlantic travel times. It was a technological marvel, a triumph of engineering, capable of speeds over twice the speed of sound. However, the Concorde was an economic failure. Its development costs were astronomical, so high that they could never be recovered from passenger fares, even with tickets costing many times more than a regular flight. It consumed an immense amount of fuel, making it incredibly expensive to operate. Furthermore, the sonic boom it generated meant it was largely restricted to flying over oceans, limiting its viable routes. While it gained a legendary status and served as a symbol of luxury, only 14 production Concordes ever entered service. The 2000 Air France Concorde crash in Paris, although attributed to external factors, debris on the runway, dealt a final, devastating blow to public confidence and hastened its retirement in 2003. The dream of mass supersonic air travel died with it, but the Concorde was not the only, nor necessarily the biggest, SST failure. Across the Atlantic, the United States also harbored supersonic ambitions with the Boeing 2707. This was to be America's answer to the Concorde, an even larger, faster, and more ambitious design. Initially envisioned with a variable sweep wing like a fighter jet, but on a massive scale, its sheer size and complexity led to enormous weight and engineering challenges. The design was repeatedly revised, costs skyrocketed, and environmental concerns, particularly regarding the sonic boom and potential ozone layer depletion, grew louder. The American SST program was ultimately canceled in 1971 before a single prototype was completed, having already consumed over $1 billion, billions more in today's money. It was a technological white elephant before it even left the drawing board. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had its own SST, the Tupolev of Tu-144, dubbed the Konkordsky due to its striking resemblance to the Concorde. It was rushed into production, often cutting corners in design and testing, largely for reasons of national prestige. The Tu-144 achieved the world's first supersonic passenger flight, even beating Concorde. However, its operational history was plagued by unreliability, maintenance issues, and numerous mechanical failures. Its most infamous incident occurred at the 1973 Paris Air Show, where one crashed spectacularly, killing all 6 crew members and 8 people on the ground. This disaster, combined with its operational woes and high costs, led to its eventual withdrawal from passenger service after just 55 commercial flights. It was a clear example of prioritizing political symbolism over practical engineering and safety. Moving from the air to the ground, let's consider grand infrastructure projects that became notorious for their budget overruns, endless delays, or outright abandonment. The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, BER, is a modern cautionary tale. Envisioned as a state-of-the-art hub for unified Germany, its construction began in 2006 with an initial opening date set for 2011. What followed was nearly a decade of continuous delays, spiraling costs, and a litany of technical failures, most notably a catastrophically flawed fire safety system that had to be completely redesigned. The airport finally opened in 2020, 9 years late, and at a cost of roughly $8 billion, 3 times its original budget. It stands as a powerful symbol of public project mismanagement, incompetence, and the devastating impact of poor planning and oversight. Then there's the Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang, North Korea. Dominating the Pyongyang skyline like a glass pyramid, this towering 105-story skyscraper was intended as a symbol of North Korean power and modernity when construction began in 1987. However, funding issues and severe economic crises in the early 1990s brought construction to a grinding halt. For decades, it stood as a concrete shell, a ghostly, unfinished monolith, earning it the nickname Hotel of Doom. While its exterior has since been clad in glass and some interior work has been done, it remains largely unoccupied and unused, a chilling monument to unrealized ambition and economic isolation. Its estimated cost exceeding $750 million makes it one of the world's most expensive abandoned buildings. Another surreal example comes from Turkey, Burj Al Babas. This was intended to be a luxury resort community featuring hundreds of identical chateau-style villas, complete with turrets and spires, targeting wealthy Middle Eastern investors. Construction began in 2014, and rows upon rows of these fantastical mini-castles were erected. However, a combination of financial difficulties and a downturn in the Turkish economy led to the project's abandonment in 2018. Today, it stands as a ghost town of hundreds of deserted, half-finished castles, a surreal and eerie sight, a testament to speculative real estate bubbles and dreams that curdled into concrete nightmares. These megaprojects, whether soaring through the sound barrier or dominating the urban landscape, share a common thread: an ambition that outstripped practicality, a willingness to overlook fundamental flaws for the sake of prestige, or a simple inability to manage the immense complexities involved. They are the expensive ghosts of human striving, reminding us that sometimes the grandest visions can lead to the most spectacular collapses. As we leave these silent monuments of failure behind, we'll delve into the often strange world of military innovations that, despite vast sums and strategic importance, proved utterly useless or fundamentally flawed. Yes, let's proceed. Having explored the colossal failures of grand civilian engineering, we now shift our focus to the even higher stakes arena of military innovation. Here, failure isn't just a financial loss. It can mean strategic disadvantage, lost lives, or even the turning tide of a conflict. Throughout history, militaries desperate for an edge have invested in some truly astonishing and utterly useless weapons and tactics. Prepare for tales of over-engineered monstrosities, bizarre battlefield blunders, and the peculiar designs that never quite fired a shot in anger, or if they did, were more dangerous to their operators than the enemy. The history of warfare is a relentless arms race, a constant cycle of innovation and counter-innovation. But amidst the development of groundbreaking weapons and decisive technologies, there's a fascinating, often darkly humorous, parallel history of military inventions that were either too complicated, too impractical, too costly, or simply too ridiculous to ever be effective. These are the forgotten arsenals of futility, the strategic miscalculations cast in steel and gunpowder. Let's begin with the truly bizarre concept of animal warfare, taken to a mechanical extreme. During World War II, the British considered using exploding rats. The idea was to stuff dead rats with plastic explosives, place them near German boiler rooms or coal piles, and hope they would be shoveled into furnaces, igniting the explosives and damaging infrastructure. In theory, a clever act of sabotage. In reality, the Germans quickly intercepted the first batch of exploding rats, and while they never actually blew anything up, the psychological impact of finding explosive rodents was apparently quite unsettling. The British learned that animals, even dead ones, are difficult to control in a covert operation, and the logistical challenges outweighed any potential gain. It was a macabre, almost cartoonish idea that thankfully never saw widespread deployment. Staying with the animal theme, though without the explosives, consider the American military's serious, albeit ultimately fruitless, attempts to train bomb-carrying bats. During WWII, Dr. Little S. Adams proposed using Mexican free-tailed bats, equipped with tiny incendiary bombs, to attack Japanese cities. The bats would be released from planes at high altitude, spread out over a target city, roost in buildings, and then after a timed fuse ignite their surroundings. The project, code-named Project X-Ray, actually reached testing phases. The bats proved difficult to handle, escaping during initial tests and even setting fire to a general's car and a hangar. While theoretically ingenious in their ability to infiltrate structures, the sheer unpredictability of animals and the logistical nightmare of handling millions of bat bombers doomed the project. It was a bizarre blend of biological warfare and pyrotechnics that thankfully was shelved. Moving to larger, more conventional but equally misguided weaponry, let's examine the concept of superguns. Throughout history, nations have dreamt of artillery so massive it could strike targets hundreds of miles away. The most infamous modern example is Iraq's Project Babylon, initiated by Saddam Hussein in the late 1980s. This audacious project, led by Canadian engineer Gerald Bull, aimed to build an enormous supergun, codenamed Big Babylon, with a barrel over 500 feet long. It was intended to launch projectiles or even satellites into space, but its true purpose was likely to deliver long-range conventional or even nuclear payloads. The sheer scale of the gun made it impractical to conceal, difficult to transport, and astronomically expensive. Before it could be completed, the components were intercepted, and Gerald Bull was assassinated, allegedly by Israeli agents. Big Babylon remains a stark monument to the perils of pursuing technologically unfeasible and strategically provocative weapons. Then there are the tanks that were just too much. The German Maus, Panzer VIII Maus, from World War II, holds the distinction of being the heaviest fully enclosed tank ever built, weighing nearly 190 tons. Envisioned as an unstoppable mobile fortress, its sheer bulk made it agonizingly slow, max speed about 8 mph on flat ground, impossible to transport over most bridges it had to drive underwater, and a massive consumer of fuel. Only 2 prototypes were ever built, and neither saw combat. The Maus was a perfect example of over-engineering, a weapon so extreme in its design that its practical military value was almost non-existent. It was an immovable object that could barely move itself. And what about the Krumlov? This was a curved barrel attachment for the St. G44 assault rifle, developed by the Germans during WWII. The idea was to allow soldiers to shoot around corners or over obstacles without exposing themselves. It came in various angles, including 30, 45, and 90 degrees. While the concept of shooting around a corner sounds appealing, the reality was fraught with problems. The bullets would often deform or fragment as they exited the curved barrel, drastically reducing accuracy and velocity. The barrel attachment itself had a very short lifespan before becoming clogged or breaking. It was an ingenious idea on paper that simply defied the laws of ballistics and practical weapon design. Staying with personal weaponry, but moving to more unconventional uses, consider the pigeon-guided missile, or Project Pigeon, another bizarre WWII-era American project. Psychologist B.F. Skinner proposed using pigeons trained through operant conditioning to guide bombs or missiles. The pigeons would be placed in the nose cone of a missile, looking at a screen displaying the target. When the pigeon pecked at the target image, sensors would translate these pecks into steering signals, guiding the missile. While the pigeons proved remarkably adept at this task in laboratory conditions, the military found the concept too outlandish and difficult to implement in real-world combat scenarios. It was a fascinating psychological experiment, but a wildly impractical military solution. Finally, let's discuss the grand naval blunders that never quite floated. During World War II, the British conceived of Project Habakkuk, an audacious plan to build an aircraft carrier out of picrete, a composite material made of wood pulp and ice. The idea was that picrete would be strong, difficult to sink and self-repairing if damage allowed water to freeze. The proposed carrier would be massive, over 2,000 feet long and theoretically unsinkable. While small prototypes were built and Pickrete was shown to be surprisingly robust, the project proved unfeasible on a grand scale. The immense refrigeration equipment required to keep the ship from melting, the logistical nightmare of its construction, and the rapid advancements in conventional naval technology ultimately led to its abandonment. It was a frozen dream that melted away under the heat of practicality. These military blunders, from exploding rodents to ice aircraft carriers and pigeon-guided missiles, highlight the desperate, sometimes ludicrous, lengths to which nations will go in times of conflict. They are a testament to human creativity, but also to the sobering reality that not every ambitious idea, no matter how clever or well-funded, translates into effective battlefield technology. And with that, we conclude our exploration of military missteps, moving on to the perhaps more subtle but equally impactful failures in the world of communication and information. You're right to continue our journey through the curious failures of human ingenuity. Having explored the loud and often dangerous world of military blunders, we now turn our attention to something seemingly more benign: communication and information. In an age where we take instant global connectivity for granted, it's easy to forget the countless peculiar, impractical, or downright flawed inventions that once promised to revolutionize how we share thoughts, send messages, and consume knowledge. Prepare for tales of cumbersome machines, misjudged technologies, and the times when connecting with others proved far more complicated than anyone intended. In the vast tapestry of human progress, few threads are as vital as communication. From the earliest cave paintings to the instantaneous digital whispers of today, our drive to share information, ideas, and emotions has spurred remarkable invention. Yet, this very drive has also led to a fascinating array of devices and systems that, despite their ambition, utterly failed to bridge the gap between sender and receiver. Some were too slow, some too complex, and others simply misunderstood the fundamental human need for clarity and convenience. Let's begin with the very foundational idea of instantaneous long-distance communication, long before electricity was harnessed for telegraphs. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the cutting-edge technology was the optical telegraph, or semaphore line. Invented by Claude Chappe in France, these systems consisted of a series of towers, each with movable wooden arms, positioned within sight of one another. Operators would manually adjust the arms to represent letters or phrases, and the message would be relayed from tower to tower across vast distances. While remarkably fast for its time, a message could travel hundreds of miles in hours, not days. It had profound limitations. It was incredibly expensive to build and maintain, requiring a vast network of towers and trained personnel. More crucially, it was entirely dependent on line of sight and clear weather. Fog, rain, snow, or even nightfall rendered the entire system useless. A simple cloud could bring a critical message to a grinding halt. It was a brilliant mechanical concept, but one utterly at the mercy of the elements, a silent testament to ambition thwarted by nature. As electricity began to illuminate the world, the dream of instantaneous communication shifted to the electric telegraph. While ultimately a resounding success, its early days were fraught with bizarre variations and impractical designs. Before Samuel Morse's elegant single-wire system, inventors experimented with incredibly complex setups. Imagine telegraphs that required multiple wires for each letter, or elaborate systems that used chemical reactions on paper to record messages, leaving a noxious mess. Some early telegraphs used banks of dozens of needles, each corresponding to a letter, requiring trained operators to decipher complex patterns. These were not user-friendly, demanding immense precision and patience from their operators. The simplicity of Morse code and a single wire, while not immediately obvious, proved to be the elegant solution that made the telegraph viable. Many early, cumbersome electric telegraph designs were simply over-engineered solutions to a problem that needed a more minimalist approach. Then we move into the realm of the personal telephone, an invention that transformed society. But before Alexander Graham Bell's patent, and even after, there were many rivals and strange attempts at voice transmission. Some early acoustic telephones, for instance, relied on literally speaking into a tube over a short distance, a sort of glorified tin can phone for buildings. These were more curiosities than practical communication devices, limited by distance and the need for a direct, unobstructed path. The earliest electric telephones were also clunky, required immense power, and often transmitted voices with such distortion that conversation was a frustrating exercise in guesswork. Imagine trying to conduct a business deal or a heartfelt conversation over a crackling line that barely rendered words intelligible, forcing you to shout into an unwieldy apparatus. The notion of a picture phone or video phone has tantalized inventors for over a century. The earliest attempts, emerging in the early to mid-20th century, were remarkably ambitious for their time. AT&T's Picturephone Mod I in 1964, for example, was a technological marvel, allowing two people to see each other while talking. However, it was prohibitively expensive, around $160 for a 3-minute call in 1964 dollars, equivalent to over $1,500 today, required dedicated lines, produced grainy black and white images, and was plagued by privacy concerns and a lack of public interest. People found the idea of being constantly on camera unsettling, and the cost simply wasn't justified for most. The picturephone was a classic case of an invention being technologically possible, but failing utterly on the grounds of cost, practicality, and societal acceptance. It was a vision of the future that arrived far too early and with too many strings attached. Beyond direct communication devices, the way we accessed and disseminated information also saw its share of peculiar flops. Consider the ambitious, yet ultimately misguided, efforts to create universal, simplified phonetic alphabets. In the early 20th century, various reformers pushed for radical changes to spelling and pronunciation in English, believing it would simplify learning and communication. While well-intentioned, these attempts largely failed to gain widespread acceptance. Imagine if every book, every newspaper, every document had to be rewritten in a new, phonetically consistent but visually alien script. The sheer inertia of established language and orthography proved an insurmountable barrier, demonstrating that sometimes, even logical improvements fail in the face of cultural habits and familiarity. Even the humble fax machine, a technological mainstay for decades, had its less successful predecessors. Before the clean, thermal paper faxes of the late 20th century, early facsimile machines from the mid-19th century were incredibly slow, produced messy chemical prints, and required constant human supervision. Imagine a machine that took an hour to transmit a single page, often resulting in a smudged, barely legible document. These were more laboratory curiosities than practical business tools, requiring a level of dedication and patience from their operators that simply wouldn't fly in a fast-paced world. And then there's the truly absurd, the pneumatic post. While more successful as a niche application, e.g., in banks for sending documents, the idea of a city-wide, underground network of pneumatic tubes for delivering mail or even small packages was seriously considered in major cities like London, Paris, and New York in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Imagine a vast, subterranean labyrinth of tubes, with canisters zipping through at high speeds. While some limited systems were built, the logistical nightmare of maintenance, the immense cost of construction, and the inevitable blockages and breakdowns ensured it never became a widespread alternative to traditional mail delivery. It was a futuristic concept, straight out of a steampunk novel, that simply couldn't compete with the simplicity and scalability of human mail carriers and vehicles. From weather-dependent semaphore lines to talking cars and pneumatic postal systems, the history of communication is a testament to humanity's unyielding desire to connect, but also to the myriad ways in which that desire can lead to peculiar detours and spectacular dead ends. Each garbled message, each failed connection, provided lessons that ultimately refined the incredible communication technologies we rely on today. As we conclude this foray into failed signals, we'll turn our attention to the often overlooked world of strange and forgotten household appliances, where convenience often clashed with practicality in the most amusing ways. Yes, let's continue. Having explored the hit-and-miss world of communication technologies, we now return to the often comical realm of domestic life, specifically to the curious and often perplexing appliances that promised to revolutionize the home, but instead faded into obscurity. Prepare yourself for tales of over-engineered solutions to simple problems, gadgets that created more mess than they cleaned, and the sheer audacity of inventors who genuinely believed we needed a dedicated machine for virtually every mundane task. The modern home is a marvel of convenience, filled with appliances that hum, whir, and simplify countless daily chores. But this effortless existence is built upon a foundation of trial and error, a long and often amusing history of domestic contraptions that were either too complicated, too dangerous, or just plain useless. Tonight, we'll pull back the curtain on the peculiar appliances that once graced catalogs and showrooms, only to be banished to the attic or the landfill, monuments to misguided domestic ambition. Let's start in the kitchen, the heart of many homes, and often the birthplace of culinary chaos. We've already touched upon the juicero and eggmaster, but they are merely the tip of the iceberg of questionable kitchen tech. Consider the various electric butter churns that were marketed to home cooks in the early 20th century. While fascinating from an artisanal perspective, the vast majority of households simply bought butter. A bulky, loud, and single-purpose machine dedicated to turning cream into butter was a luxury few needed or wanted, especially when factory-produced butter became widely available and affordable. It was a gadget for a niche that barely existed. Then there's the entire genre of single-purpose cooking devices that were far too specialized. The hot dog toaster, for instance. This appliance, popular in the mid-20th century, was designed to perfectly toast hot dog buns and cook the wieners simultaneously, usually with dedicated slots. While it delivered on its promise, its utility was so limited that it quickly became a novelty item. Why dedicate counter space to a machine that only cooks hot dogs when a pan or a grill could do the job, and much more, with greater versatility? It was a testament to the marketing power of convenience, even when that convenience was incredibly narrow. Moving from the culinary to the clean, the laundry room has also seen its share of bizarre innovations. Before the automated washing machine and dryer became ubiquitous, some inventors dreamed of more convoluted solutions. Imagine the portable washing machine, which in its early iterations was often a hand-cranked device, essentially a small barrel on legs with an agitator. While portable, it was still incredibly laborious and messy, requiring constant manual effort. These designs quickly evolved, but the initial clumsy attempts highlight the arduous nature of laundry before true automation. But even with automation, sometimes the ideas went too far. The concept of built-in ironing boards seemed sensible, but some were over-engineered, involving complex folding mechanisms that were prone to jamming or breaking. And then there was the almost mythical desire for a self-folding shirt machine. While still largely a pipe dream today, various prototypes have emerged over the decades, attempting to mechanically fold clothes. These machines are inevitably bulky, expensive, excruciatingly slow, and prone to tangling fabric. The simple, elegant solution of human hands, for now, remains superior, highlighting the difficulty of automating tasks requiring dexterity and judgment. Consider also the various attempts at automatic shoe cleaners and shiners for the home. While convenient in hotels or public spaces, a large, noisy, and often messy machine dedicated solely to shining shoes was simply overkill for most households. They were expensive, required specific polishing compounds, and often left a trail of dust. The simple brush and cloth, once again, proved to be the more practical and cost-effective solution. The living room, too, has been a canvas for peculiar appliances. The mid-20th century saw the rise of the home soda fountain. Inspired by drugstore counters, these bulky units aimed to bring the joy of freshly mixed sodas and milkshakes into the domestic sphere. While appealing in concept, they were expensive, difficult to clean, required constant replenishment of syrups and carbon dioxide tanks, and ultimately took up too much space. The novelty quickly wore off, replaced by the simpler, more convenient store-bought sodas and blenders. It was an indulgence that proved too much of a hassle. And then there were the various air purification machines that predated modern HEPA filters and purifiers. Some of these early devices were little more than glorified fans with a damp cloth or a tray of water, claiming to wash the air. Others emitted questionable ions or even used ozone, sometimes with harmful side effects. These often loud, inefficient, and occasionally dangerous contraptions were a testament to the early, often unregulated market for health and wellness devices, promising benefits they couldn't deliver. Finally, let's consider inventions that were simply too loud, too large, or too impractical for the average home. Imagine the indoor clothes drying carousel, a massive motorized device that promised to spin and dry your laundry indoors, but took up an entire room and consumed vast amounts of electricity. Or the various exercise machines from early last century that resembled industrial equipment more than fitness devices, requiring immense strength just to operate them. These were often so cumbersome and noisy that they quickly became glorified coat racks or were relegated to dusty attics. From the culinary oddities of the Eggmaster to the alarming impracticality of the anti-bandit bag and the mechanical meows of a fake cat, the domestic sphere has proven to be a rich ground for ambitious, yet ultimately flawed, inventions. Each curious contraption reminds us that while the desire for convenience and efficiency is universal, the path to achieving it is often winding, leading through a landscape of well-intentioned, but ultimately useless designs. With these household horrors behind us, we now move to a broader, more societal level, exploring grand engineering projects that, despite immense effort and investment, simply never came to fruition. You're absolutely right to delve into the fascinating world of personal adornment and utility. After exploring the eccentricities of household gadgets, we now turn our attention to the more intimate realm of fashion and accessories. Here, the quest for style, convenience, or even perceived improvement has led to some truly outlandish inventions. Contraptions designed to be worn on the body that were either deeply impractical, aesthetically offensive, or simply failed to solve any real problem. Prepare for tales of bizarre hats, questionable footwear, and the peculiar personal items that were, thankfully, fleeting trends. For as long as humans have existed, we have adorned ourselves, not just for warmth or protection, but for expression, status, and sometimes for sheer novelty. This innate desire to enhance our appearance or simplify our lives through what we wear has given rise to countless innovations, but also to a remarkable collection of utterly absurd and impractical wearables. Tonight, we examine the strange accessories and fashion trends that, despite fleeting moments of attention, rightly faded into the dusty archives of sartorial blunders. Let's begin with the often overlooked realm of headwear, where functionality frequently took a backseat to ostentation or outright absurdity. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the bicycle gained popularity, inventors sought to make cycling more comfortable or stylish. This led to creations like the collapsible top hat, designed for cyclists. Imagine a formal top hat that could fold flat for storage or be carried more easily. While ingenious in concept, these hats were often flimsy, difficult to reassemble perfectly, and rarely offered any practical protection. They were a niche solution to a non-existent problem, sacrificing elegance for a peculiar form of portability that few truly desired. More bizarre were the various attempts at mobile rain protection that involved intricate head-mounted umbrellas or rain shields. These often looked like miniature, personal tents perched precariously on the head, obscuring vision and making the wearer appear utterly ridiculous. While the intention was to keep dry, the unwieldiness and social awkwardness ensured these inventions never caught on beyond the realm of novelty catalogs. A simple handheld umbrella, it turned out, was far more practical and less likely to invite stares. Moving from the head down, let's consider the fascinating, if flawed, world of personal climate control garments. In the quest for ultimate comfort, especially in hot climates, inventors envisioned clothing that could keep you cool. This led to ideas like the air-conditioned suit or vest, which would feature small battery-powered fans or even ice packs integrated into the fabric. While some modern versions exist for very specific industrial uses, early attempts were bulky, noisy, inefficient, and often resulted in awkward lumps or visible wires. The battery life was dismal, and the cooling effect minimal compared to the discomfort of wearing a heavy, fan-laden garment. Most people sensibly opted for lighter fabrics or simply sought shade. It was a premature attempt at comfort, burdened by the limitations of early miniaturized technology. Then there's the curious case of footwear follies. While shoes have evolved for comfort and function, some designers veered into the truly impractical. The roller skate shoes of the 1980s, for example, which had retractable wheels in the sole. While undeniably fun for children, they were often cumbersome for walking, prone to breaking, and a safety hazard on uneven surfaces. They were a hybrid that excelled at neither skating nor walking, a novelty that quickly wore off. More alarmingly, some early attempts at therapeutic or corrective shoes were so rigid, ill-fitting, or heavy that they caused more discomfort and problems than they solved. Imagine shoes that resembled medieval torture devices, designed with the best intentions but a complete disregard for natural foot anatomy. Beyond clothing and shoes, the world of personal accessories is a goldmine for strange failures. The cigar holder ring was a peculiar invention for smokers, allowing them to wear their lit cigar on their finger, leaving their hands free. While this might sound convenient, the obvious fire hazard, the constant smell of smoke on the hand, and the sheer absurdity of the aesthetic ensured this particular accessory never became a mainstream item. It was a solution to a problem few people had, creating more problems than it solved. Consider also the various attempts at personal communication devices that predated the mobile phone. Before the cellular revolution, inventors explored clunky, two-way wrist communicators, or tiny, handheld radios that were more toys than practical tools. These devices often had terrible range, required large antennas, and were prone to interference. The notion of a Dick Tracy-style wrist radio was appealing, but the technology simply wasn't ready to miniaturize practical communication into such a small form factor. They were glimpses of the future, delivered with the limitations of the past. And what about the ear-mounted spectacle cleaner? This was a small, motorized device that clipped onto your glasses and at the push of a button would theoretically clean your lenses. In practice, it was noisy, often smeared rather than cleaned, and required constant battery changes. The simple act of wiping your glasses with a cloth, it turned out, was far more effective and less cumbersome. It was a gadget that turned a 5-second task into a complicated, irritating ordeal. Finally, let's consider some truly strange beauty and grooming aids. In the early 20th century, the pursuit of a perfect complexion led to devices like the facial steamer helmet or the electric face mask. These were often elaborate contraptions resembling futuristic helmets or masks, designed to deliver steam, heat, or even mild electrical currents to the face, promising rejuvenation. While some forms of facial steaming are still used today, these early devices were often unwieldy, uncomfortable, and sometimes dangerous, with risks of burns or skin irritation. They were an intimidating, almost industrial approach to personal care, far removed from the relaxing spa treatments we know today. From collapsible top hats and air-conditioned suits to cigar holder rings and ear-mounted spectacle cleaners, the world of fashion and personal accessories is a testament to the endless human desire for novelty, convenience, and perceived self-improvement. Each strange contraption, each fleeting trend, serves as a reminder that not every idea that seems clever on paper translates into practical or desirable reality when worn on the body. As we conclude this segment on personal blunders, we'll turn our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of sports and recreation, where the pursuit of fun and competition has also led to some truly peculiar inventions. Yes, let's dive into the peculiar pursuit of leisure. Having explored the oddities of personal fashion, we now turn our attention to the more playful, yet equally error-prone realm of sports and recreation. For every beloved game or efficient piece of exercise equipment, there exists a curious graveyard of inventions that promise to make us fitter, faster, or simply more entertained, only to deliver frustration, injury, or bewildered laughter. Prepare for tales of aquatic antics, peculiar playthings, and the bizarre contraptions that made recreation a genuine chore. The human spirit, ever restless, constantly seeks new ways to play, compete, and stay active. From ancient Olympic games to modern extreme sports, this drive for recreation fuels a constant stream of innovation. But just as with other areas of human endeavor, the path to perfect play is paved with good intentions and sometimes hilariously bad designs. Tonight, we'll examine the sporting inventions that were less about fun and more about folly, the recreational gadgets that gathered dust, and the games that simply failed to catch on. Let's begin with the often overlooked world of aquatic recreation, where humanity's desire to walk on water or glide effortlessly across its surface led to some truly strange creations. Imagine the various attempts at water walking shoes or water skis that predate modern, efficient designs. Early water skis were often cumbersome, heavy wooden planks that required immense strength and balance just to stay afloat, let alone propel oneself. They were less about graceful glides and more about exhausting struggles. Similarly, water walking devices often consisted of large, unwieldy pontoons or paddle shoes that made locomotion incredibly slow and awkward, more suitable for a circus act than genuine recreation. The promise of effortlessly traversing a lake was often met with splashing, stumbling, and profound disappointment. Then there's the amphibious bicycle, a concept that has reappeared throughout history with limited success. The idea is alluring, a bike that can transition seamlessly from land to water. Early designs often involved inflatable pontoons or paddle wheels that could be deployed when entering the water. While some prototypes could technically float and move, they were universally slow on both land and water, heavy and mechanically complex. The transition from one mode to another was rarely seamless, often requiring awkward manual adjustments. It was a jack of all trades, master of none, demonstrating that sometimes two specialized vehicles are better than one compromised hybrid. Moving from water to more grounded, yet equally peculiar sports, let's consider the realm of personal fitness gadgets that promised revolutionary results with minimal effort. The mid-20th century, in particular, was a golden age for passive exercise machines, capitalizing on the desire for a fit physique without the sweat. The notorious vibrating belt machine is a prime example. Users would stand with a wide belt wrapped around their waist, which would then vibrate vigorously, supposedly shaking away fat and firming muscles. While it certainly provided a vigorous shake, medical science quickly debunked its claims of muscle toning or fat loss. It was a noisy, uncomfortable contraption that offered an illusion of effort, but no real benefit, leaving users no thinner, but perhaps a little more rattled. Equally dubious were the various slimming suits or sauna suits made of non-breathable materials, designed to make the wearer sweat profusely during exercise, promising rapid weight loss. While they did induce sweating, largely water loss, not fat, they posed significant risks of dehydration and overheating, and any weight lost was quickly regained. They were a dangerous shortcut that misunderstood the fundamental principles of fitness and healthy weight management. And what about the sports equipment that tried to be too clever? Imagine the golf ball finder, a gadget that claimed to emit a signal allowing you to easily locate lost golf balls. While seemingly helpful, these devices were often unreliable, prone to false positives, and ultimately cumbersome, leading frustrated golfers to simply buy more balls. Or the various automatic tennis ball servers from early last century that were clunky, unreliable, and often launched balls with unpredictable trajectories, making practice more frustrating than effective. The simplicity of a human hitting a ball, or even a modern, sophisticated ball machine, proved superior to these early, flawed attempts. Then there are the games that simply never caught on. Consider the various attempts to create new, complex board games or outdoor sports that were either too complicated to learn, too difficult to set up, or simply lacked the intrinsic appeal of established games. Imagine a game with dozens of obscure rules, or a sport requiring custom-built, expensive equipment for which there was no widespread interest. These are the forgotten pastimes, the innovations in play that never found their players, demonstrating that novelty alone is not enough to create a lasting recreational activity. Finally, let's consider the peculiar world of personal transport as recreation. Beyond the earlier amphibious bikes, there were walking stilts that were less about practical use and more about novelty, offering a precarious and dangerous way to traverse sidewalks. Or the various personal flying machines from the mid-20th century that were often jetpack prototypes. While fascinating, these were incredibly loud, consumed vast amounts of fuel for mere minutes of flight, and were so dangerous that only highly trained test pilots could ever hope to operate them. The dream of personal flight, while enduring, remains largely confined to specialized military or stunt applications, far from the recreational mass market. From water-walking shoes and vibrating belts to bizarre golf gadgets and personal jet packs, the history of sports and recreation is filled with inventions that promise to elevate our leisure time, but often only delivered frustration, discomfort, or an expensive laugh. These curious flops remind us that while the pursuit of fun is boundless, the practicality of our inventions is often quite limited. As we conclude this segment on recreational ridiculousness, we'll shift our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of medicine and healthcare, where good intentions sometimes led to truly questionable cures. Yes, let's proceed into a realm where the stakes are highest, where the pursuit of health and the relief of suffering have led to some of humanity's most profound breakthroughs, but also to its most unsettling and misguided inventions. Having explored the lighter side of recreational flops, we now delve into the often disturbing history of medicine and healthcare, where good intentions, limited scientific understanding, and outright quackery converge to produce truly bizarre cures, dangerous devices, and treatments that did more harm than good. Prepare for tales of questionable remedies, shocking surgical tools, and the alarming lengths to which people would go in the desperate hope of healing. The human body, in all its complexity and fragility, has always been a source of fascination and fear. From ancient remedies to modern pharmaceuticals, the quest to understand, repair, and extend life has driven relentless innovation. Yet, for every life-saving vaccine or revolutionary surgical technique, there exists a disturbing collection of medical inventions that, in hindsight, were not only ineffective, but often caused immense suffering or even death. Tonight, we examine the dark corners of medical history, where the line between healing and harm became tragically blurred. Let's begin with the pervasive, and often deadly, realm of quack remedies and patent medicines. Before the era of rigorous scientific testing and regulation, the market was flooded with concoctions promising miraculous cures for every ailment imaginable. These tonics and elixirs often contained dangerous ingredients like cocaine, opium, alcohol, or even mercury and arsenic, all disguised as health-giving compounds. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, for instance, widely marketed for teething babies in the 19th and early 20th centuries, contained morphine. While it certainly soothed crying infants, it did so by sedating them, leading to widespread addiction and even deaths among children. These were not just ineffective, they were chemical weapons disguised as medicine, preying on the vulnerable and desperate. The discovery of radiation in the late 19th century, while a scientific breakthrough, led to a period of terrifying medical fads. Convinced of its energetic properties, charlatans and even some legitimate medical practitioners began incorporating radioactive elements like radium into everything from drinking water, the radiator craze, to toothpaste, cosmetics, and even suppositories. The promise was increased vitality, eternal youth, and a cure for everything from impotence to arthritis. The tragic reality was radiation poisoning, debilitating illnesses and horrific deaths, famously exemplified by the radium dial painters and wealthy socialites who consumed radiator. The radium spa and radioactive revigorators were particularly chilling, inviting people to bathe in or ingest radioactive water, believing it was beneficial. It was a spectacular, deadly misunderstanding of a powerful new force, leading to a host of inventions that were literal sources of slow, agonizing death. Beyond internal remedies, the world of medical devices also produced its share of shocking failures. Consider the early attempts at blood transfusions that often used animal blood. In the 17th century, physicians experimented with transfusing blood from lambs into humans, leading predictably to severe allergic reactions, shock, and death. It took centuries of understanding blood types and cross-matching before human-to-human transfusions became safe. These were desperate, uninformed attempts, often ending in tragedy, driven by a profound lack of understanding of human biology. The quest to cure baldness, a persistent human vanity, also led to some truly bizarre contraptions. Beyond the vibrating helmets we touched upon previously, there were devices that employed vacuum suction or even electrostimulation directly to the scalp, promising to stimulate hair growth. These were often uncomfortable, ineffective, and sometimes caused skin irritation or headaches. The idea was that increased blood flow or nerve stimulation would magically regrow hair, a notion far removed from the complex biological reality of hair follicles. And what about the various devices designed to cure common ailments like headaches or insomnia? The electric head massager from the early 20th century, often a clunky, handheld device with vibrating prongs, promised relief through percussive therapy. While a gentle massage can be soothing, these early devices were often too powerful, too noisy, and offered little lasting relief, often exacerbating the very discomfort they aimed to alleviate. More alarming were the various electrotherapy machines from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which delivered mild, or not so mild, electric shocks to various parts of the body, claiming to rebalance the body's energies and cure everything from nervousness to rheumatism. These often unregulated devices, sold to the public, were at best placebo, at worst dangerous, causing shocks, burns, or even heart irregularities. The field of dentistry also saw its share of strange ideas. Before modern anesthetics, pain management was primitive. Consider the various tooth extractors that resembled medieval wrenches or pliers, designed for brutal, often traumatic tooth removal. Or the early, often ill-fitting dentures made from anything from carved wood to ivory or even human teeth, which were uncomfortable, prone to decay, and offered little in the way of proper chewing function. The Waterloo teeth, made from the teeth extracted from soldiers killed at the Battle of Waterloo, offer a particularly macabre insight into the desperate measures taken for dental prosthetics. Finally, let's consider the concept of the iron lung. While a life-saving invention during polio epidemics, allowing patients with paralyzed respiratory muscles to breathe, its very design highlighted a profound limitation. It was an enormous, cumbersome, and isolating machine, trapping the patient within a metal cylinder, only their head protruding. While effective, it was a crude, uncomfortable, and restrictive solution. The development of positive pressure ventilation and eventually vaccines against polio made the iron lung largely obsolete, a testament to how even necessary inventions can be surpassed by more elegant and less invasive solutions. From morphine-laced tonics and radioactive health products to crude blood transfusions and electrically shocking cures, the history of medicine is a stark reminder that the pursuit of health, while noble, is susceptible to ignorance, desperation, and outright fraud. These alarming inventions underscore the critical importance of scientific rigor, ethical guidelines, and public education in protecting us from treatments that, far from healing, inflicted lasting harm. And with that sobering thought, we'll now turn our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of entertainment and leisure. You've chosen to journey into a lighter, yet equally peculiar corner of human endeavor. Having navigated the unsettling history of medical blunders, we now turn our attention to the more whimsical, yet equally flawed, world of entertainment and leisure. From the earliest attempts at immersive experiences to the peculiar gadgets designed to amuse, this realm is rife with inventions that promised boundless fun, but delivered only frustration, disappointment, or an unexpected headache. Prepare for tales of cumbersome contraptions, sensory overload gone wrong, and the peculiar ways humanity tried, and often failed, to entertain itself. The human desire for diversion, for escape, for a good laugh or a thrilling experience is as old as civilization itself. From storytelling to gladiatorial contests, from simple board games to grand theatrical productions, we constantly seek new ways to fill our leisure hours. This relentless pursuit of amusement has, predictably, led to a fascinating array of inventions that, despite their ambition, failed to capture our imaginations or simply proved too impractical to endure. Tonight, we examine the strange relics of leisure, the entertainment systems that were more work than play, and the peculiar devices that left us wondering, what was the point? Let's begin with the ambitious, yet often clunky, attempts at personal home entertainment, long before the advent of television or even widespread radio. Imagine the various home cinema machines of the early 20th century. These weren't projectors as we know them, but often intricate devices that allowed individuals to view short film loops through a tiny eyepiece. The kinetoscope, invented by Thomas Edison, was a pioneering example. While revolutionary for its time, it was a solitary viewing experience, expensive, and required constant manual winding or coin insertion. It was a novelty, a curiosity, rather than a truly communal or practical form of home entertainment. The idea of gathering around a shared screen would have to wait. Then there are the various attempts at immersive experiences that predate modern virtual reality. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the diorama and panorama were incredibly popular. These were massive, painted scenes, often depicting historical battles or exotic landscapes, viewed from a central platform or through peepholes. While impressive for their artistry, they were static, required immense spaces, and lacked true interactivity. More ambitious were the early attempts at smell-o-vision or feel-o-vision in cinemas. During the mid-20th century, inventors tried to release specific scents during a film, or even use vibrating seats to enhance the experience. These attempts were often clumsy, the smells were inconsistent or overpowering, and the effects were more distracting than immersive. The technology was simply too crude to create a truly convincing sensory illusion, often resulting in more discomfort than delight. Moving to the more active side of leisure, the world of toys and games has produced some truly baffling creations. Consider the various robot toys from the mid-20th century that promised futuristic interaction, but delivered only clunky, repetitive movements and limited functionality. These often required expensive batteries, made irritating noises, and quickly lost their novelty once the initial wonder wore off. The anticipation of a lifelike companion often gave way to the disappointment of a mere mechanical puppet. And what about the electronic games that simply missed the mark? Before the dominance of sophisticated video game consoles, there was a proliferation of single-purpose electronic games, many of which were incredibly basic and repetitive. Imagine the various electronic handheld puzzles or reaction games of the 1970s and 80s that, while novel for a short time, offered minimal replayability and often frustrating controls. These were quickly overshadowed by more versatile gaming platforms, becoming relics of a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The realm of musical instruments has also seen its share of peculiar failures. Beyond the traditional guitars and pianos, inventors experimented with instruments that were either too difficult to play, produced unpleasant sounds, or were simply too cumbersome. Consider the telharmonium, invented in 1897, one of the earliest electronic musical instruments. It was a colossal machine, weighing hundreds of tons, designed to generate music electrically and transmit it over telephone lines. While visionary in concept, it was too large, too expensive, and too impractical to ever gain widespread adoption. It was a musical white elephant, a prototype of the future that was simply too big for its time. Even the simple act of listening to music saw its share of missteps. Before the portable convenience of cassette players and Walkmans, inventors dreamt of personal music devices that were far less practical. Imagine the portable record player from the mid-20th century, which was essentially a small, battery-powered turntable. While technically portable, the fragile records, the constant need for replacement needles, and the susceptibility to skipping with any movement made it a deeply impractical way to enjoy music on the go. The very nature of vinyl records clashed with the concept of portability. Finally, let's consider the various novelty cameras, or instant photography gadgets that promised creative freedom, but delivered only blurry, poor-quality images or complicated development processes. Before the digital age, companies experimented with cameras that could print tiny, low-resolution photos directly from the device, or peculiar film formats that never caught on. These were often more frustrating than fun, leading to wasted film and disappointed amateur photographers. The simplicity and clarity of traditional film photography and later digital quickly rendered these experimental concepts obsolete. From the solitary viewing of the kinetoscope to the frustrating smell-o-vision and the cumbersome portable record players, the history of entertainment is dotted with inventions that aimed for our amusement, but often only provoked a sigh. These peculiar flops remind us that capturing the human imagination and sustaining it requires more than just novel technology. It demands a true understanding of what makes us laugh, gasp, or simply relax. As we conclude this segment on the follies of fun, we'll turn our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of agriculture and food production, where humanity's quest to feed itself also led to some truly bizarre inventions. Yes, let's cultivate some strange tales. Having wandered through the quirky landscape of failed entertainment, we now shift our focus to the most fundamental of human endeavors, feeding ourselves. Agriculture, that ancient science of coaxing sustenance from the earth, and food production, the art of preparing it, have seen continuous innovation aimed at increasing yield, reducing labor, or making food more accessible. But just as often, these ambitions have led to truly bizarre machines, unappetizing food products, and cultivation methods that were more hindrance than help. Prepare for tales of mechanical marvels gone wrong, culinary oddities, and the strange inventions that failed to bring sustenance to the masses. From the earliest plow to the most advanced genetic engineering, humanity's relationship with food has been defined by a relentless drive to produce more efficiently, and to prepare it in new and inventive ways. This critical pursuit has led to revolutionary breakthroughs, but also to a fascinating collection of misguided inventions that highlight the pitfalls of overambition, misunderstanding natural processes, or simply creating food products no one wanted to eat. Tonight, we unearth the strange relics of agricultural and culinary failures, the machines that broke down, and the dishes that never made it to the table. Let's begin in the fields, where the promise of automation and enhanced yield often met stubborn soil and uncooperative crops. The early 20th century, a period of intense mechanization, saw many attempts to automate every aspect of farming. Consider the various iterations of walking tractors or pedal-powered farm implements. While admirable in their ingenuity, these often clumsy machines were incredibly slow, physically exhausting for the operator, and prone to breaking down in the uneven terrain of a farm. A simple horse-drawn plow, or even manual labor, often proved more reliable and efficient than these early, underpowered mechanical beasts. They were a vision of a future farm that simply wasn't ready to be born. Then there's the even more ambitious concept of the vertical farm, or plant factories in their earliest forms. While modern vertical farming is a cutting-edge technology, early 20th century visions sometimes involved complex, multi-story greenhouse structures with intricate, often unreliable watering and lighting systems. These were incredibly expensive to build and maintain, struggled with pest control in confined spaces, and lacked the energy efficiency required to make them economically viable for mass food production. They were a revolutionary idea, but one that arrived decades, if not a century, before the technology could support it. Moving from cultivation to consumption, the realm of food processing and novel food products is ripe with strange failures. The post-World War II era, with its emphasis on convenience and scientific innovation, saw the rise of many processed foods that, while promising, simply failed to tempt the palate. Take, for example, jellied everything. The advent of gelatin as a common ingredient led to a bizarre culinary trend, where almost any food, from vegetables to meat and fish, was suspended in shimmering, often brightly colored gelatin molds. Imagine a savory chicken and vegetable jelly, or a sardine aspic. While perhaps visually interesting, the texture and often incongruous flavors were off-putting to most, thankfully leading to the decline of this peculiar culinary fad. Equally unappetizing were the various powdered food initiatives. While powdered milk and some instant beverages found success, attempts to create entire meals in powdered form beyond emergency rations largely failed. The idea was portability and long shelf life. The reality was a lack of flavor, an unappealing texture when rehydrated, and a profound psychological barrier to consuming something that resembled industrial dust. The promise of nutrition in a simple scoop often overlooked the fundamental human desire for palatable, recognizable food. Consider the various attempts at synthetic meat or meat substitutes in the mid-20th century, long before the sophisticated plant-based alternatives we have today. These early versions were often made from soy or other vegetable proteins, but lacked the texture, flavor, and appeal of real meat. They were often bland, rubbery, or had an unpleasant aftertaste, designed more for their nutritional value or cost-effectiveness than for culinary enjoyment. Most consumers, given the choice, chose the real thing, leaving these early attempts at lab-grown or plant-based proteins to wither on the vine. And what about the automatic egg cracker and separator? While professional kitchens might have such devices today, early home versions were often clunky, messy, and prone to breaking yolks or leaving shell fragments. The simple act of cracking an egg by hand, it turns out, is remarkably efficient and less prone to mechanical failure. It was an over-engineered solution to a very basic task, creating more fuss than it saved. Then there are the bizarre attempts at pest control in agriculture that were either ineffective or had severe unintended consequences. Before the development of modern pesticides, some methods involved incredibly crude or environmentally damaging approaches. Imagine massive, noisy crop duster machines that were inefficiently designed and spread chemicals unevenly, or early mechanical bug collectors that were too slow to cover large areas and often damaged crops. These early attempts to protect harvests highlighted the complex ecological balance and the need for precision in agricultural intervention. Finally, let's discuss the peculiar failures in food packaging and preservation. While canning and freezing revolutionized food storage, some inventors sought stranger methods. Consider the concept of food encased in plastic resin for long-term display or preservation. While sometimes used for decorative purposes, the idea of preserving actual food items in a solid block of plastic for consumption never caught on, for obvious reasons. Or the various attempts at creating self-heating or self-cooling food containers that were either unreliable, expensive, or prone to leaks and chemical reactions, making the food unpalatable or even unsafe. The elegance of a simple can or a freezer bag often proved superior to these overly complex solutions. From walking tractors and vertical farm failures to jellied dinners and early synthetic meats, the history of agriculture and food production is a testament to humanity's endless hunger for innovation, but also to the many ways in which that hunger can lead to peculiar, unappetizing, or utterly impractical solutions. Each failed crop, each unpalatable dish, provided lessons that ultimately refined the incredible systems that feed billions today. As we conclude this segment on culinary curiosities, we will turn our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of personal safety and protection. Yes, let's explore the human compulsion to shield ourselves, even if the solutions were more dangerous than the threats they sought to mitigate. Having navigated the curious landscape of agricultural and culinary flops, we now shift our focus to a more fundamental human instinct: safety and protection. From the perils of crime to the unpredictable wrath of nature, inventors have constantly sought to devise new ways to keep us secure. But this noble pursuit has, predictably, led to some truly outlandish, impractical, or even counterproductive inventions, often creating more problems than they solved. Prepare for tales of bizarre body armor, peculiar defensive devices, and the alarming ways humanity tried and often failed to keep itself safe. The instinct for self-preservation is deeply ingrained. Throughout history, individuals and societies have invested immense ingenuity into protecting themselves from harm, whether from criminals, natural disasters, or simply the daily hazards of existence. This drive has led to the development of robust fortifications, clever alarms, and protective gear. Yet, for every effective shield or warning system, there exists a curious collection of inventions that, despite their well-meaning intent, were either too cumbersome, too ineffective, or simply too absurd to offer genuine security. Tonight, we examine the strange relics of failed defense, the gadgets that left us more vulnerable, and the ingenious ideas that were fatally flawed. Let's begin with the very personal level of self-defense contraptions, often designed for the average citizen in an age before modern policing was widespread. Imagine the various forms of early personal alarms from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These were often cumbersome, hand-cranked sirens or loud whistles, intended to attract attention. While the concept was sound, the sheer size, effort required to operate them, and the often anemic sound they produced made them largely ineffective in a genuine emergency. A startled attacker might be briefly annoyed, but unlikely to be deterred. More alarming were the various anti-theft devices for personal items that verged on the ridiculous. We previously touched on the anti-bandit bag. Another example was the exploding briefcase, or self-destructing wallet, ideas that occasionally surfaced in spy fiction and were even briefly contemplated in reality. The concept was that if stolen, a hidden mechanism would ignite a smoke bomb, dye pack, or even a small explosive charge, destroying the contents or marking the thief. The obvious dangers of accidental detonation, collateral damage, and the destruction of one's own valuables made these concepts far too risky for any practical use. The cure, in this case, was certainly worse than the disease. Moving from personal defense to broader security, consider the unusual attempts at home security systems from decades past. Before the advent of reliable electronic sensors, some inventors proposed elaborate mechanical tripwires, noisemakers, or even systems that would release nets or harmless, or not so harmless gases upon intrusion. These were often complex to install, prone to false alarms from pets or wind, and could pose a danger to the homeowners themselves. Imagine accidentally triggering a net trap in your own living room. The simplicity and reliability of modern motion sensors and cameras would eventually render these Rube Goldberg-esque contraptions obsolete. Then there's the bizarre history of personal protection from the elements or unusual environmental threats. During the gas mask craze of the early 20th century, particularly around WWI and WWII, inventors created not just masks for humans, but also for animals. The gas mask for horses, or even gas mask for babies in prams, were developed, often looking terrifying and cumbersome. While the intent was protection, the comfort, fit, and effectiveness for non-human subjects were highly questionable. A baby enclosed in a sealed, gas-proof pram, for instance, might be safe from gas but highly susceptible to overheating or panic. These were desperate measures in desperate times, often highlighting the limitations of technology when confronted with universal threats. Consider also the various attempts at wearable personal flotation devices that were not life jackets as we know them, but more eccentric designs. There were inflatable suits that were bulky and difficult to move in, or elaborate contraptions with paddles and propellers designed to make swimming easier. These often provided buoyancy at the expense of mobility, turning a swimmer into a clumsy, floating target. The simple, streamlined life vest, it turned out, was the elegant solution. Even the everyday act of walking in the dark led to strange inventions. The shoe-mounted flashlight, a small light attached directly to the front of a shoe, was conceived to illuminate the path directly ahead without needing to carry a separate flashlight. In practice, they were easily damaged, produced a weak beam, and provided a very limited field of vision, often only illuminating the wearer's feet rather than the path as a whole. A simple handheld flashlight or headlamp proved far more versatile and effective. Finally, let's turn our attention to the more extreme, sometimes comical, attempts at disaster preparedness. In the atomic age, with the pervasive fear of nuclear war, people sought protection in various ways. Beyond the widespread but largely impractical fallout shelters, which often lacked sufficient supplies, air filtration, or long-term livability, there were even more bizarre concepts. Imagine the personal backyard bomb shelter that resembled a giant metal capsule or a reinforced concrete pipe, often buried just beneath the surface. While providing a modicum of protection from initial blast, these were claustrophobic, offered little in terms of long-term survival, and often filled with a profound sense of despair. The reality of nuclear apocalypse far outstripped the capabilities of these rudimentary, often delusional, forms of personal protection. From cumbersome personal alarms and exploding briefcases to horse gas masks and shoe-mounted flashlights, the history of safety and protection is filled with inventions that, despite their noble aims, often failed to deliver. These curious flops remind us that genuine security often lies not in elaborate contraptions, but in robust design, thoughtful planning, and sometimes the simple recognition of when a threat is beyond the scope of individual invention. As we conclude this segment on defensive disasters, we'll turn our attention to the fascinating and often frustrating failures in the realm of publishing and information dissemination. Yes, let's explore the often overlooked yet critical realm of how we produce, share, and consume knowledge. Having navigated the unsettling world of failed protective devices, we now turn our attention to the more academic, yet equally prone to error, domain of publishing and information dissemination. From the earliest attempts to mass-produce texts to the peculiar ways we tried to organize and access knowledge, this field is rife with inventions that promised wider literacy, faster learning, or better access to facts, but instead delivered only frustration, confusion, or an impressive waste of resources. Prepare for tales of cumbersome printing presses, bewildering reading machines, and the strange systems that failed to enlighten the masses. The written word, that cornerstone of civilization, has undergone countless transformations, from clay tablets to digital screens. The drive to record, reproduce, and distribute information has fueled an endless stream of ingenious devices. Yet for every Gutenberg press or digital e-reader, there exists a curious collection of inventions that, despite their ambition, utterly failed to facilitate the spread of knowledge. Some were too complex, some too niche, and others simply misunderstood the fundamental human act of reading and learning. Let's begin with the very foundational act of reproducing text. While Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized the world, countless inventors sought to improve upon it, often with limited success. Consider the various attempts at typewriting machines before the standard QWERTY layout and efficient designs became ubiquitous. Early typewriters were often mechanical monstrosities, incredibly loud, prone to jamming, and requiring immense force to operate. Some had bizarre keyboard layouts, spherical typing elements, or required highly specialized training just to produce legible text. They were a slow, laborious, and frustrating alternative to handwriting, highlighting the challenge of early mechanical automation. The promise of faster, clearer writing often came with a steep learning curve and a cacophony of clanking parts. Then there are the various attempts to create universal language, or simplified phonetic printing systems. While noble in their intent to make reading easier or bridge linguistic divides, these movements often proposed radical changes to established alphabets and spelling. Imagine a world where every book had to be printed in a new, unfamiliar script, or where common words were spelled in ways that defied centuries of tradition. The sheer inertia of existing literary culture, combined with the difficulty of retraining an entire population, proved to be an insurmountable barrier. These were attempts to unilaterally impose a better system, failing to grasp the organic and resistant nature of language evolution. Moving from creation to consumption, the act of reading also inspired some peculiar inventions. Consider the microfilm reader in its early, cumbersome forms. While microfilm was a revolutionary way to store vast amounts of information compactly, the early readers were often bulky, difficult to load, and required precise manual adjustments to focus. Users would spend more time wrestling with the machine than actually reading, often straining their eyes on the grainy, flickering images. It was a technology that offered immense storage capacity, but a deeply unsatisfying user experience, making the act of reading a chore rather than a pleasure. More bizarre were the various attempts at speed reading machines, or devices that promised to force the eye to read faster. These often involved mechanical shutters or moving pointers that dictated the pace of reading, or even projected words rapidly onto a screen. While they could superficially increase reading speed, they often did so at the expense of comprehension and retention. The nuance of understanding, the pause for reflection, and the natural rhythm of absorbing information were sacrificed for mere velocity, proving that faster isn't always better, especially when it comes to learning. And what about the strange attempts at automatic book turners, for people who were too relaxed or too incapacitated to turn pages themselves? These were often complex mechanical arms that would delicately or clumsily flip a page at the push of a button. While a seemingly thoughtful invention for the disabled, many were unreliable, prone to tearing pages, or required constant adjustment. The simple human finger, it turned out, was still the most effective and gentle tool for the job. The realm of information storage and retrieval also saw its share of peculiar flops. Before the widespread use of digital databases, Inventors dreamed of mechanical systems for organizing vast libraries of cards or documents. Imagine the Memex, a hypothetical device envisioned by Vannevar Bush in 1945, which was essentially a personal microfilm-based information retrieval system, allowing users to link related documents. While a visionary concept that foreshadowed the internet, the physical technology of the time made its practical implementation incredibly complex, bulky, and slow. It was an idea far ahead of its technical capabilities, a testament to what we dreamed of doing with information, long before we had the means. Finally, let's touch upon the niche market of educational toys that aim to teach complex subjects through peculiar mechanical or electronic means, but often fail to engage. Consider early, electronic language translators that were clunky, had tiny vocabularies, and often produced wildly inaccurate translations. These were more frustrating than helpful, often leading to more confusion than communication. Or the various scientific kits that, while conceptually sound, involved overly complicated assembly, dangerous chemicals, or yielded results that were too subtle or abstract for young learners to appreciate. The promise of effortless learning often bumped against the reality of poorly designed interfaces and abstract concepts that required more than just a flashing light or a whirring gear. From clunky early typewriters and impractical speed-reading machines to unreadable phonetic alphabets and complex mechanical book turners, the history of publishing and information dissemination is littered with inventions that, despite their noble aims, failed to enlighten. These curious flops remind us that the simple act of sharing and absorbing knowledge is deeply human, and that technology, when it interferes with this natural process, often falls flat. As we conclude this segment on the unread volumes, we'll turn our attention to the often overlooked world of civil engineering and urban planning, where humanity's quest to build and organize itself also led to some truly colossal and occasionally bizarre failures. Yes, let's explore the monumental, sometimes comical, mistakes etched into the very landscapes we inhabit. Having navigated the unsettling world of failed protective devices, we now turn our attention to the grandest canvas of human ambition: civil engineering and urban planning. From utopian cities that crumbled to bridges that buckled and traffic solutions that caused more chaos than calm, this realm is rife with inventions and designs that promised efficiency, beauty, or perfect societal harmony, but instead delivered only dysfunction, disaster, or eerie monuments to misplaced genius. Prepare for tales of abandoned metropolises, architectural nightmares, and the strange ways humanity tried, and often failed, to build its ideal world. For millennia, humans have striven to build, to organize, to create lasting structures and coherent communities. From the ancient wonders of the world to the sprawling megalopolises of today, civil engineering and urban planning are testaments to our collective ingenuity. Yet, this ambition, when untethered by practicality, foresight, or a true understanding of human behavior, has led to a remarkable collection of colossal failures. Tonight, we examine the strange relics of misplaced urban dreams, the structures that defied their purpose, and the grand plans that simply fell apart. Let's begin with the often repeated dream of the utopian city, meticulously planned on paper but disastrous in practice. The most infamous example is Prutigo in St. Louis, Missouri. Built in the mid-1950s, this massive public housing project was designed with modern architectural ideals, featuring high-rise buildings and ample green spaces. It was initially hailed as the future of urban living. However, poor design choices, like skip-stop elevators that encouraged crime on neglected floors, lack of maintenance, racial segregation, and a concentration of poverty led to rapid deterioration, rampant crime, and a dehumanizing environment. Within 2 decades, Prutaigo became a symbol of urban decay, and its towers were famously demolished in the 1970s, a stark monument to a well-intentioned, but ultimately catastrophic, failure of social engineering and architectural planning. Then there are the grand visions of transportation infrastructure that, despite immense cost, became notorious for their dysfunction. Consider the various attempts at elevated highways or double-decked roads within dense urban areas. While seemingly offering a solution to congestion by adding capacity, these structures often became eyesores, cast perpetual shadows on the streets below, created noise pollution, and sometimes simply moved the congestion bottleneck elsewhere. The Alaskan Way Viaduct in Seattle and the Embarcadero Freeway in San Francisco, damaged by an earthquake and later torn down, are prime examples of these concrete behemoths that ended up fragmenting urban landscapes and were eventually dismantled due to their negative impact on city life and their susceptibility to seismic events. They were a brute force solution that overlooked the complex interplay between infrastructure and urban fabric. And what about the revolving restaurants or rotating observation decks that were once the height of architectural modernity in the mid-20th century? While many still exist, the early versions were often plagued by mechanical issues, slow rotation speeds that induced dizziness and maintenance nightmares. The novelty often wore off quickly, leaving behind a complex, expensive mechanism for a feature that offered little more than a slow-moving view. They were an architectural gimmick that rarely justified its engineering complexity. The very concept of self-cleaning buildings, or smog-eating facades, has tantalized architects, but early attempts were often disappointing. Some buildings incorporated elaborate, active cleaning systems that were prone to breaking down, or were far less effective than manual cleaning. The promise of a perpetually pristine exterior often clashed with the realities of dirt, weather, and mechanical reliability. Similarly, early green buildings often integrated passive systems that, while well-intentioned, were either ineffective or required constant, complex human intervention to function as designed. Consider also the various attempts at underground cities or subterranean malls as solutions to urban density or harsh climates. While some successful examples exist, like Montreal's RESO, many have failed due to lack of natural light, poor air circulation, difficulty in navigation, and a general human preference for open spaces. The allure of escaping the elements often succumbed to the psychological impact of being constantly underground, leading to underutilization and eventual abandonment. They were a vision of efficient space utilization that underestimated the human need for sunlight and connection to the outside world. Then there are the grand, sometimes bizarre, traffic management solutions that made things worse. Imagine the elaborate, multi-level traffic circles or complex interchange designs from the mid-20th century that were so confusing they caused more accidents and congestion than they solved. Or the one-way street systems implemented without proper consideration for local businesses or pedestrian flow, turning vibrant areas into dead zones. These were often conceived by engineers looking at maps, rather than planners understanding how people actually move and interact within a city. Finally, let's turn to the truly unique and often unsettling failures of environmental control within urban spaces. Consider early concepts for domed cities or structures designed to completely enclose an urban area, promising climate control and protection from the outside world. While purely theoretical for most large-scale applications, smaller iterations like Biosphere 2 in Arizona highlight the immense difficulty of creating truly self-sustaining, closed ecological systems. These ambitious experiments often struggled with unforeseen biological imbalances, engineering failures, and the psychological toll on their inhabitants. They were a grand vision of human control over nature that often proved hubris. From the sociological collapse of Prutigo and the concrete jungles of elevated highways, to the dizzying heights of revolving restaurants, and the claustrophobic depths of failed underground cities, the history of civil engineering and urban planning is a testament to humanity's unyielding desire to shape its environment. Yet these colossal failures remind us that grand designs, without a deep understanding of human needs, ecological balance, and the unpredictable forces of nature, can lead to monumental and sometimes chilling disappointments. And with that, our long journey through the crazy inventions that flopped throughout history comes to its quiet conclusion. Perhaps by now you've drifted off to sleep, lulled by the fascinating echoes of human ambition and its many curious missteps. Good night.